Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto What If Fanfic 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was hunted by a deadly inn who fell in love with him. Part 2. Naruto. They were taking their sweet time in the forest surrounding the frost. The head frost nin had seen Sakura head that way. Naruto rubbed his face with his hand and glanced around at his surroundings with blurry eyes. It had been a long day and he was already tired of chasing Sakura, who disappeared like a ghost. Not to mention, the hateful remarks from his companion were beginning to annoy him. "Doesn't this annoy you?" he finally asked her after a while of walking in complete silence. No answer. "Daydreaming about me, Ayumi?" he asked her, deciding to have some fun annoying the hell out of her. That brought her current train of thought to a halt. Her eyebrows pulled together in annoyance as her eyes narrowed. "I don't know what your problem is, but I bet it's hard to pronounce," she told him, staring up at him as he laughed. "Well then, sweetheart, it's a good thing you're not good with words." He smiled and jumped back to avoid a punch to the shoulder. "What did you say?" she fumed. Naruto raised his arms in surrender. "I'm not the one with anger issues." "Oh, really?" She raised her eyebrow at him. "I'll show you anger issues," she threatened while gripping the hilt of her sword with her hand. Now, let's not get carried away," he reasoned before appearing behind her, his hand on hers stopping her from pulling the blade out. "I was only sent to kill one person, not two. Like you could lay a finger on me." She huffed like he was missing some inside joke before letting go of the hilt of her blade. Naruto rolled his eyes and stared at the trees as they sped them by. He thought they must be in the middle of the forest by now. There was a small clearing ahead, where no trees grew. She walked a few more paces in front of him before stopping abruptly at the edge of the clearing. Ayumi turned back around to face him. "What do you plan to do after we catch this Sakura?" she asked. Her eyebrow rose. He stopped and glanced at the ground briefly. "You know, I haven't really thought about it. I guess I'd just go back to doing the same old stuff. But I'd much rather still be here, with you." He muttered the last two words so low he wasn't even sure she heard him. But to his utmost emberment her head tilted towards the ground as a small smile graced her lips. It was a sad, happy kind of smile. The kind of smile you expression when you say goodbye to someone you care for and know you would never see again. "There is something I have been meaning to tell you," she said, concentrating very hard on something as she closed the distance between her and Naruto. She was very close to him now. Mixed emotions crossed her face as she rested her hand on the shoulder of his flat jacket. "And that is?" he asked, not taking his eyes off her. He knew she was just messing around. She was most likely trying to get him back for his last attempts to play jokes on her or had some alternate reasons so this could help make his life hell. Sure, they had a moment back at the ice-covered lake, but that was nothing. It was just an accident. Her emotions always left him confused. One second she would be talking to him and joking around, the next moment she was serious and closed off. He knew she didn't like him. That had to be the reason she was on and off with him. But that didn't stop her from wrapping her arms around his neck and bending his head closer to hers. His mind exploded. What was she doing? Was she trying to manipulate him? Could she? Would she? He felt her arms straighten out behind his neck as she pulled him closer to her. Her lips hovered close to his, not even a centimeter apart. He was no amateur. He had little to some experience with this kind of thing. But it never felt like this with Hinata. Their lips hadn't even touched and already an uncontainable excitement was building inside of him. He didn't trust his hands so he left them limp by his sides. She rose up on her toes so that their noses were touching. Her forehead was now resting against his as she let out a breath she had been holding in. One of her hands moved to cup his cheek. He couldn't focus on her eyes. They were too close. He wanted to. It would tell him everything she was thinking. "Minato, I needed to tell you that I'm S." She stopped and her arms tensed around his neck. "I need to tell you that," she said again and stopped as if deciding what she was going to say next. We are being followed, Ayumi told him quietly before pulling back away from him and slipping something that was in her hand back into her vest pocket. Only then did he feel the 4 signatures of chakra closing in on them. And like a switch, the shinobi in him took control as his mind began to point out little facts about the intruders. At first, he thought it was another genin team, but after speculation he realized these shinobi were much stronger. Naruto straightened his back and waited for the owners to arrive. Most likely these signatures belong to rogues. In no time they appeared, spread out in an offensive position. Well, what do we have here? One of the men questioned, smiling wickedly at the 2 Junin. A mist ninja and leaf ninja working together. One of his followers questioned with fake surprise. The 4 men stood side by side eyeing the 2 shinobi. The leader was bigger than all of the others put together, and by bigger he didn't mean fat or heavy. This man had a large frame and was inhumanly muscular. To match his large appearance he had a huge sword strapped to his back, which made him look even more menacing. His subordinates were just as fierce. One of them had already drawn his weapon. He was smaller than the rest, but he seemed more serious. His weapons of choice were 2 long and narrow dual swords. This man frightened Naruto. The only reason being, his swords were covered in dried blood. The killing of a person wasn't what scared him, it was the fact that the man didn't bother to clean his weapons after. Naruto's eyes wandered to the man, farthest from his leader. This rogue had a single sword, a feudal sword to be exact. It was still in its osler, the man's fingers hovered above it. He wore a sickening smile that told Naruto all this man wanted was their weapons and anything else he could get his hands on. The last rogue was average size. He was the only man out of the 4 who had a forehead protector. A single music note stood out on the metal with a line slashed through it, diagonally. His arms were crossed as he stared back at Naruto with concentration. Naruto inclined his head over to his partner to judge her reaction of their unsuspected guests. 2 for me, 2 for you. Ayumi whispered under her breath to Naruto. Naruto smiled brightly and nodded at her. God, this girl could read his intentions like an open book. Then he stopped and really looked at her. What had happened 2 seconds ago? What was that? Naruto shook his head. Stop it, Naruto. She is not interested in you. There had to be a reason. He stopped the urge to snap his fingers. Of course, she felt the signatures before him and wanted to warn him. So instead of saying it out loud and losing the edge of surprise, she made it appear that they were kissing so she could tell him. Very split of the moment. He smiled slightly. She was a very dangerous shinobi, not to mention a good actress. Boss, maybe they're out here on their honeymoon. The one in the back laughed at his joke. The funny thing was, no one else laughed. The mist nin is mine. The leader barked, smiling at her, showing his yellowed teeth. I've always wanted to kill one. For some reason, unknown to him, Naruto had to resist the urge to move to stand in front of Ayumi. He acted on his feeling and he moved a step closer to her. She raised a questioning eyebrow at him, but he only shook his head. Where did this protective urge come from? So what will it be, pretty boy? The lead rouge asked, cracking his knuckles against his palm. Well, I guess we can take a break, Ayumi. He nodded to her, and in spoken conversation pinged through their eyes. Besides, it won't be much of a challenge. Why, you little? One of the rogues started, but he couldn't finish his sentence. He choked on the rest of the words. Naruto grabbed a hold of his cloak and pulled it off of him. Tossing it on the ground away from the group of ninja, his eyes narrowed. The fabric would slow him down and he didn't want to risk it getting torn. He could barely hear the 4 rogues as one whispered to the leader, "Boss, you take on the girl, we'll handle pretty boy." Naruto smiled slightly. This was the worst situation to be in. They were in for a run for their money. Ayumi would completely destroy the leader. He turned to her to see if she heard them, but she was already giving him a look. Don't hurt yourself, she said sarcastically with a wink, turning to face the rogues again. Who did she think she was? He fumed. His thoughts were cut off when the rogues launched themselves at Ayumi and him. Jumping back to avoid a swipe of the feudal rogue's weapon, he pulled out a kunai. A loud scraping noise filled the air as metal contacted metal. He tried to watch Ayumi's fight, but the three rogues were not giving him any breathing room. Kage Bushin no Jutsu, he shouted, making the hand signs as a clone appeared on either side of him. At the same time his clones and him charged forward to the three rogues. He decided it would be in his best interest if he used as less chakra as he could manage. Which of course meant no high-level ninjutsu. So he decided to participate in close combat. Replacing his kunai he reached back grabbing a hold of his katana and brought it out in front of him while his clones mirrored his movements. Jumping into the air, he sliced the kunai out off the X-sound man's hand. Before the man could even react, he shoved the blade of his katana deep into the man's heart. Meeting no resistance, the blade continued until it shot out his back. The X-sound nin coughed up blood to the side of Naruto as Naruto pushed the blade in until the hilt met skin. Naruto was now supporting the dying weight of the man. Ha! Dead weight. Get it? Naruto sighed in annoyance at his brain and concentrated back on the fight. Sensing a presence behind him, Naruto ripped the blade back out and brought the sword up to block the feudal swordsman from crashing his stolen blade down on his head. Glancing around quickly Naruto noted that both clones had already dispersed. Damn it. This will be a challenge, hardly. Pushing his blade against the rogues, the metal of his katana slid off, no longer trapped under the feudal sword. Using his foot, he kicked the man down onto his back. With two hands wrapped around the sword's hilt he brought his katana down on the other man who survived his clone. This man was the two dual swords freak. The rogue's bloody blades formed an X as he blocked Naruto's katana from going any further. Putting pressure down on the dual swords he glanced over at Ayumi. She had managed to cut the leader up pretty bad. His clothes were blood-soaked as he charged at her again, his miv sword raised. He saw the man he kicked down earlier running over to help his boss, but Naruto was not about to let him. Letting go of the sword with one of his hands, Naruto pulled a kunai out of his pouch and threw it at the man's back. Hitting its mark, the feudal man tumbled over at Ayumi's feet. She merely glanced at Naruto and mouthed the words, "Concentrate on your fight." He turned back to the man pinned under the force of his katana. The rogue was struggling. His arms were shaking violently as Naruto put both hands on the hilt of the blade. Naruto watched as the muscles on his shoulders and arms bunch up as the man used all his strength to resist the blade. Now, his mind yelled at him as Naruto pulled his weapon out of the man's scissor lock. The rogue's dual blades, no longer under pressure, scraped past each other. The man's arms were up in a touchdown position from the force he put on both his weapons. Naruto smiled, knowing this is the position he wanted the man in. Shifting his katana into his left hand, Naruto rotated on his foot and grabbed the rogue's left hand that was clasped around his blade. Guiding the rogue's own weapon against him, Naruto plunged the blade into the man's stomach. In a last attempt to save himself, the man brought his other sword down, but it was met halfway by Naruto's katana. Game over, he muttered to the rogue as his eyes rolled back into his head. Letting go of the man's clasped hand, Naruto watched him fall backwards. From this position the man appeared to have killed himself with his own blade. He shook his head, tearing his eyes away from the man. It was just another move he learned from I-Nations. To say he wasn't a little bit tired would be a lie. He turned to watch Ayumi's fight. It appeared he had it easy. The leader of the rogues had some skill left. He must have been a Junin before he left his village or something. He was considering on helping her, but he knew she'd be pissed if he even dared to. Instead, he stabbed his weapon into the ground and pulled it back out. The blood was no longer on his weapon as he returned it to his back. Naruto returned his gaze back to the fighting before him. At that second, Naruto noticed the leader running at Ayumi forming complicated hand signs. But unknown to her, a man he had thought was dead had returned to his feet. It was the man who had run to help his boss from earlier. But something was different about him. His arms were coated in paper bombs while he raised his kunai in his right hand. The man smiled wickedly, staring down at the mist nin. Pushing off the tree where he stood, he raised his finger of his left hand to his lips. Dread and realization rained down on him like a shower. The rogue was going to activate the bombs once he was close enough to her, he thought in horror. It was a suicidal attack. She would be distracted while the one behind her would make the kill. Pushing off his legs, Naruto ran to intercept the man. He had no time to make a cage bushin to help. Hell, his only thought was to save her. He didn't know how this would end, all he knew was he was going to stop it somehow. Naruto landed right behind Ayumi, just before the suicidal man did. Putting his left forearm up to block the weapon, he felt the man's kunai embed itself into his flesh. But at the same time Naruto used his right hand to form a Rasengan. His no high-level jutsu plan was gone and now so would be this rogue. The rogue's eyes narrowed as he realized the man in front of him screwed his plan up. Once noticing Naruto's jutsu, he attempted to jump back away from Naruto. But he was too late. Moving his right hand up, Naruto shoved the spiraling ball of chakra into the rogue's stomach. The feudal rogue's eyes went wide open as the jutsu shoved him backwards, but as he began to fly into the air he muttered a few words, activating the paper bombs. Naruto didn't think, he just let his body act. Releasing the hold on the ball of chakra, he spun on his heel to grab Ayumi into his arms as the explosion went off. With his last thought, he pushed off on his foot as the explosion threw both of them into the air. The bits of fire and gust of wind that came with it caused him to land sideways into a tree, Ayumi still firmly in his arms. It seemed his back would provide the only protection. The tree broke on impact as they both tumbled towards the ground. Still, the force of the impact wasn't enough to slow them down as Ayumi and him were thrown across the ground. He landed on his back, spraying dirt everywhere. Once they stopped sliding he let go of her, but stayed on the ground. He wasn't dead, thank God, but he wasn't sure of the damage his stunt caused. There was a dull pain on his back and another one creeping up on his arm. He watched Ayumi push herself into a standing position. Turning to him he saw the anger clearly written across her face. "You idiot!" She screamed. "I had him." "No, you didn't. That guy was behind you and..." She cut him off. "I know. I was only feigning that I was unaware. Then you had to show up and mess everything up." She screamed at him. "Only faking. Shit. So she really wasn't in trouble. God, Naruto, always rushing into things. Do you even think before you act?" She asked, still yelling at him. "I didn't know. I just saw you there. I wasn't going to sit back and just watch. That's not me." He retaliated, but hissed in pain when he realized his back was indeed hit by the explosion and the tree really did not help. Not to mention the wound the kunai left in his arm. It was then he noticed something on her face that he hadn't seen before. Aside from the anger etched into her face, he saw the worry hidden deep behind her eyes. But as soon as he caught it, it disappeared and anger took its place again. "Your idiocy could have gotten us both killed," she stated, no longer yelling. "Are you all right?" he asked, trying to divert the conversation. "Yes, I'm fine," she said, sounding confused. "Good," he simply replied, pushing himself into a sitting position, ignoring the dull ache of pain. "See, you didn't get killed or hurt. Everything is fine." "Yay, but..." She stopped herself and switched to a different choice of sentence. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Really? Then stand up," she said, crossing her arms. "Fine, I will." He smiled. In order to not look weak, he rose to his feet. The movement not only hurt like hell, but he stumbled and grabbed onto the bark of a tree for support. Great. Now she knew. "Sakura." Sakura's eyes widened. "Please tell me you at least jumped out of the way before the explosion went off." There wasn't enough time. He trailed off as he noticed her approach. "Turn around." Minato did as he was told and turned his back towards her. Sakura gasped. That bloody idiot. She was silent as she stared at his back for a few seconds. What? Minato asked. Were you born a complete idiot or have you mastered some rare, unknown art? Yay. Because being an idiot is why I managed to kill 3 rogues in a less amount of time than it took you to kill one. Sakura took a deep breath to control herself. And that's why one of the rogues you supposedly killed was able enough to aid his leader in killing me. Minato didn't speak for several seconds. That hole better not have a retort. How bad is it? He asked, finally, trying to look over his shoulder. I won't know until I take off the remains of your shirt and jacket, she stated. Until you take off my shirt and jacket. Did I hear you right? Sakura could practically hear the smirk in his voice. I said you. Stop imagining things. Lucky for him, he kept his mouth shut after that. He unzipped the jacket from the front and let it drop to the ground. Afterward, he carefully slipped off the remnants of his shirt. It's a good thing you jumped when you did, otherwise the most elite medic nin wouldn't even be able to heal your skin completely. She took a couple more steps toward him to get a better look at the damage. How do you know so much? He grunted, relaxing his shoulders. I know some medical ninjutsu. She said, examining his back. Anything else you're keeping from me? He asked, sounding annoyed. I didn't realize I was supposed to tell you my life story, Sakura responded. I can easily fix you up. Were you hurt anywhere else? Yay. My forearm. What happened? She sighed. Kunai went through it. He said simply. Of course it did. She said. Are you going to help me or not? Minato sighed. Just thought I'd give you a little hell first. She lifted her arms and placed them an inch from his back, letting the green light envelope her hands. You may feel a slight tingle. Ayumi said, skillfully letting her hands travel around his back. Nothing I can't hand. Ouch, damn it. What the hell are you doing? He yelped. I thought you said a tingle. Stop being a baby. She told him, concentrating on the wound but decided to be gentler with her ninjutsu. I would if you weren't peeling my skin off. He argued, but his breathing became slower. There, all done. Now let me see your forearm. She said with authority. He turned around to face her. Sakura allowed herself a small smile at his childish complaints. She gently cradled his arm in one of her hands. The kunai missed the tendons between your 2 bones on your forearm. It seemed to have hit your radius and the bone stopped it from going any deeper. How strange, she observed. What? He asked, looking down at his arm. Your skin. She trailed off. It was already healing before I touched it. His face remained impassive. He shrugged casually. It's just a jutsu the Hokage put on me. Said I was always getting hurt. So I was right, he doesn't know that I know he's a Jinchuriki. This could be to my advantage. Huh, he doesn't need to know. He nodded and made a move to pick his vest up off the ground. What happened to the leader? He asked, picking up his cloak he had tossed on the ground before the fight. It was still in perfect condition, unlike his Junin jacket. Incinerated. Sakura replied, motioning her head towards the black pit in the middle of the forest. That's the first good news. He laughed. Hey, by any chance would you like to go back to the hotel and get in one of those hot springs? Because I don't know about you but, it's getting late and I'm freezing my off. She took a quick glance at Minato before saying, I guess it couldn't hurt. It couldn't hurt getting a closer look at that body. He was already sprinting back to the hotel. Minato, you are going to tear open your wounds again. She called out after him. It won't matter because I get first dibs on the hot springs. He called out laughing. I guess he doesn't know the springs aren't separated according to your. Sakura smirked. It's a shame you're not allowed to be completely after her thought. She took off after Minato. You know, now that I think about it, his name does sound kind of familiar. Maybe a guy in my village has the same name. That has to be it. I've never met him before, I definitely would have remembered him. When Sakura and Minato finally found their way to the frost gates, they slowed to a walk. Minato turned to face her. Do you want to go straight there? No. I figured we'd take a detour through the Earth country, down to wind country and up back through the fire country before finally going to the hot springs. Sakura rolled her eyes. Excuse me for offering to give you a moment to yourself. Sakura felt instantly guilty. He sounded sincere. Minato shrugged. Ya know, I'm trying to imagine you with a personality. But that's okay. I can be a sarcastic bitch too. Sakura decided it was best to keep her mouth shut. She was gonna have to find a way to be a decent person. It's just that, she was scared to let anybody get too close to her. And letting herself open up to Minato is just going to make it harder to kill him. No, it's best to just be isolated. When they reached the front of the hot springs, they stopped. What the hell? Is that even legal? I thought I was going to be alone. Love you too, Sakura muttered as she walked in. Look, the changing rooms are separate. Go be alone in there. Minato turned and walked away from Sakura as she walked into the girls' changing room. She walked over and looked in a mirror. Sakura almost recoiled at the sight of the bags under her eyes. Surely they weren't this bad yesterday. Maybe the hot water will work wonders. Sakura walked over and sat on one of the benches and placed her face in her hands. Why do I have to be the one to do this? He's the first decent guy I've met in forever and I have to eliminate him. Sakura took a deep breath. I am so sick of this killing. When I get back to the mist, I'm telling May I can no longer be her in. Why would anybody put someone through this kind of torture? Doesn't anybody know how we feel? Sakura stood up and threw the bench across the room. YME, she shouted. I didn't ask for this. Sakura felt something cold slide down her cheek and she lifted her hand to feel it. It was wet. She put her finger in front of her eyes and examined it. What she saw startled her. Tear. I haven't cried since, I can't even remember. The same sensation was on her face again. She turned to face the mirror. Several tears were rolling down her cheeks. I'm crying. I'm actually crying. Sakura slowly sat on the ground and allowed all of her frustrations and worries flow out of her eyes. It felt good to just let go. She couldn't remember the last time she let everything out of her system. After a good 5 minutes, she finally lifted herself off the floor. She quickly stripped down to her bra and panties and covered herself with a towel. She wiped her eyes with her hands and walked out of the room. It's about time you got out here. I thought you had died. Sakura looked across the spring to find Minato sitting in the water with his arms stretched out behind him on the ledge of the spring with his eyes closed. Sakura's demeanor quickly relaxed upon seeing Minato. How do you know it was me? Minato shrugged. Mother's intuition. Sakura burst out laughing as she walked over to the edge of the water. Ya know, that was actually funny. Minato cracked open one of his eyes. I'm sorry, did you just laugh? Sakura's giggles came to a cease. Well, if you're gonna be like that, then no, I didn't laugh, she said as she let the towel drop to the ground. She could have sworn Minato's eyes widened a fraction of an inch, but she could be sure. The sun had already sunk behind the roof of the building to her back, so the lighting wasn't the best. She slowly stepped into the water and let herself sink until she was sitting down. The water felt amazing against her body. She resisted a moan, not wanting to attract Minato's attention to her. Why don't we play a game? Minato asked. What kind of game? What about truth or truth? My friends and I sometimes play it on missions. We eliminated the dare part because we're always too tired to move from our position when we camp for the night. Sakura shrugged. Sure. Why not? Me first. What was it like growing up? I thought I told you I had no parents. Precisely. Minato narrowed his eyes at her. All right then. Growing up was horrible. End of story. He gave her a look that told her there was no way he was going to elaborate. Sakura offered a small smile. I won't ask you any more questions pertaining to that subject. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you actually had Compion. Actually, it seems there are a lot of things I don't know about you. Like that medical ninjutsu stunt. When were you, if at all, going to tell me about that? Is that your question? Or would you like to ask a different one before I decide to answer it? Minato was thoughtful for a moment. Fine. When did you first learn medical ninjutsu? That's a better question. I learned when I was about 15. The head of our hospital decided that I was the one that he should lend his skills down to. However, I've heard of your Hokage's legendary skills and he doesn't even compare to her. But I trained myself after he taught me everything he knew. I studied every single scroll, and if I do say so myself, I think I surpassed him by the time I was 20. That early? The head of your hospital? That's impressive. Now ask me a question, shoot. Okay. What is your dream? Minato chuckled. If you lived in the leaf, you would looked at as if you were stupid if you asked that question out loud. Well, are you going to answer me or not? I was getting there. My dream is to become Hokage. Sakura smiled. I think you'd make a great Hokage. She got up and began making her way to sit next to Minato. He watched her with wide eyes. Nobody has ever told me that before. Control yourself, Sakura. Well, I mean it. She shrugged. My turn. Minato looked at her. Have you ever been kissed? Sakura looked down at the water. Well, no, I haven't. She looked away embered. Would you like to be kissed? Sakura's head snapped up as she looked at him. What? Would you like to be kissed? He repeated as Sakura recomposed herself. That was 2 questions. Sakura poked Minato on the shoulder. This is an exception. Minato grinned. And who is supposed to kiss me? I don't see anybody in this hot spring who's kissable. Sakura felt Minato grip her chin and make her look at him. Well, in that case, I think you might be blind. Minato leaned in and gently placed his lips on Sakura's, then pulled away. How was that? Sakura leaned back in and captured his lips with hers. She could feel him chuckle in the back of his throat. Finding her bravery, Sakura wrapped her arms around Minato's neck to pull him close to her. She felt his hands grip her waist to move her closer. Minato licked the bottom of her lip, which made Sakura have to repress a shiver. As Sakura pulled away, she kept Minato's bottom lip between her teeth. When his lip was free, she whispered, "That was amazing." She let herself relish the moment before quickly pulling her arms back to her own body. Sakura, what have you done? I think I need to go to bed. I'm a little tired. She immediately got out of the hot spring and almost ran to the building. Sakura, you have just committed an #1 mistake. Never fall in love with your target. Sakura. If Sakura wasn't running, then she was walking the fastest a human being was capable of. She had no idea how she let herself open up so much as to kiss Minato, the man she's trying to kill. Sakura, what have you done? I've allowed the forbidden to happen. How can I even call myself a master after this mission is over? I can't tell Lady May or she'll never truly trust me again. What do I do? Sakura continued walking toward the hotel. As soon as she reached it, she flew up the stairs and through the hallway to her room in record time. As soon as the door was closed, she went and stood in front of the mirror. She was disgusted with herself. She had never made so grave a mistake. Sakura shouted as she punched the mirror. The GL shards fell to the floor in a slow motion. Tears began to stream down her face for the second time tonight. She couldn't keep her thoughts from reaching her voice, getting more hysterical after every thought. Why me? Why did she have to choose me for this mission? Surely, there's someone that could have killed him by now. No, of course not. I am the Mist's best in and Lady May knows it. But why Minato? He's funny, smart sometimes, handsome, caring. She paused before yelling, why did I have to fall in love with him? While screaming her last thought, she picked up the lamp on her bedside table and threw it at the wall. Sakura's whole body was shaking while she sank to the floor. Her face found its way to her hands as she continually wept. She cried for almost an hour. She didn't even stop when Minato knocked on her door and asked if she was all right. In fact, that only made the crying stronger. When her eyes were finally dry and not another single tear could be formed, Sakura stood up and faced her broken mirror. Sakura felt vulnerable, weak. What am I supposed to do? Sakura knew, of course, exactly what she had to do. She just didn't want to admit it to herself, but it was the only way. I have to kill Minato. Tomorrow. Sakura continued to stare at the broken mirror as she raised her chin and fixed her posture. There. That's the Sakura I know. Now, she looked proud and strong, the way she usually does. Sakura turned away from the mirror to go and sit on the bed. She reached over and grabbed her pack off of the floor. How many Senbon do I have left? She searched around her bag until she found what she was looking for. Only 5. That's definitely not enough. I'll have to pick up some more tonight rather than in the morning. I'll draw less suspicion from him that way. But how many should I get? 200. I think that will be sufficient. Now, what poison should I use? It has to be one that he, or the leaf, is not familiar with. I could use a poison known only to the mist. Now that leaves 5 that will do the job. However, only one of those will kill fast, Henshi strychnine. And it happens to be the only one I brought. The original poison, strychnine, was altered to become a special mist poison. Once the poison has killed its host, it destroys itself, making it look like an accidental death, hence the name Henshi. It causes extreme pain until it reaches the heart. But I would really rather not cause him any pain. Sakura shook her head. Concentrate, Sakura. She took a deep breath. Okay. This poison, when injected into the bloodstream, flows quickly throughout the whole body, shutting down the central nervous system first, then moving on to the organs, which shut down 1 minute after the poison makes contact with them, saving the heart for last. I'll just have to hope the poison works faster than his tailed beast does. That will be my major obstacle. If worst comes to worst, he will definitely pee out. I can always resort to using a kunai if necessary. Now, how will I put him in a situation to be hit with a poison Senbon? I do have Sakura to use at my disposal. That'll definitely work. She could lure him out to a clearing, just a small circle with a 5-foot radius. He will be too focused on catching her to notice an amateur tripwire circling the clearing. As soon as he activates it, a blazing fire, ignited by paper bombs, will encircle the small space. And then I'll have other paper seals, sealed with the poison Senbon, scattered across the trees but hidden from view, activated to shoot at him. No doubt at least one of them will hit him, and then the poison will do its job. If somehow I find him alive but still unconscious after the fire dies down, I will simply slit his throat. Sakura breathed out a sigh of relief. There. See, Sakura, your brilliant plans always shine through when you're in need of them. I'll pick up the Senbon and set up my trap tonight. He is probably asleep already, so this will be perfect. He will have no suspicions of me. Sakura laid back on her bed and stared at the ceiling for a few minutes. When her pulse was calm and she was confident she could flawlessly carry out her plan, she grabbed her bag, slung it over her shoulder and walked out the door. She paused for a split second to glance at Minato's door and then she continued down the hallway. Sakura awoke to the dim sunlight streaming through her window. Her first thought was, beautiful morning. Her second, today is the end. She sighed and got out of bed. 3 knocks sounded at her door. Coming, she shouted. Sakura opened her door to reveal Minato, completely dressed, ready and smiling. Today is the day, he stated proudly. You're telling me. Sakura responded as she made her way back into the room, searching for her clothes. What? No good morning. No, how did you sleep? Well, I feel special. Minato sounded sincerely hurt behind his joking demeanor. Which only made it that much harder. Get out. I'm trying to get dressed here, Sakura said, trying to sound rude. It killed her. From the corner of her eye she could see Minato slightly recoil, but he was gone in the next second. Sakura, you have a duty to your village. You can't back out now because a one-leaf shinobi. She took a deep breath to right herself again. Sakura began traveling around the room, changing into her clothes as she reached them. As she was moving, she was going down her mental checklist, making sure all of her preparations the night before had been perfect and there were no holes in her plan. Sakura had first set out for an herb shop to pick up the ingredients for the poison, which luckily hadn't taken long to make when she got back to the hotel. Next, she had gone to a weapons shop. She had to convince the owner to let her in to buy the senbon she needed, seeing as though she had showed up after they had closed. With a wink and small flirting here and there, he obliged. Finally, she sought out the clearing. When she found it, she encountered a problem. The snow. To start the fire she needed, there couldn't be any snow. It could either dim the fire, making it easy to escape, or completely put it out. Neither of which could happen for her plan to succeed. She spent an hour clearing away just enough snow to make nothing look suspicious but would also acquire her desired results. The next 30 or so minutes were used to place the trip wire, place the paper seals that would ignite the fire when the trip wire was activated, and place the paper seals that hid her poisoned senbon. Another 20 minutes was spent to conceal the paper seals. He could not be allowed to see them in advance. When she was done, she had stopped to admire her handiwork. She remembered thinking, no wonder I'm the most successful in my village. She wasn't one to be vain, but she let herself have the compliment. Sakura had finally made it back to the hotel by 1 in the morning. It took her all of 10 minutes to get ready. She checked her pack before exiting her room. She was about to knock on Minato's door when she looked down to see him sitting against the wall next to her door. Let's go, she said as she made her way down the hall. Sakura had made. Sakura. Last night so she wouldn't spend unnecessary time getting ready this morning, in case Minato decided to become suspicious. Minato. A name so unique but familiar at the same time. Why did that name ring a bell? There was no one in her village by that name. Maybe someone from the Leaf she had known before she left. Maybe her parents had used the name in one of her bedtime stories. Yes. In fact, she remembered a specific story that involved the Leaf's Hokage. They date the story to a few months after her birth. The wife of the Hokage at that time, Minato, was to have a baby. But for some reason, the birth had to be held in a secret place. Somehow, a very powerful ninja had disrupted events as soon as she had given birth and threatened to kidnap the baby, which was the night that the Nine Tails attacked. In a last attempt to save their son, Minato and his wife sacrificed their lives for their son, who is supposedly alive today. But now that I actually think about it, that story has to be true, because the Hokage did die fighting to save the village from the Nine Tails. When Sakura was very young, her mother told her the story for the first time. She never gave any new details. Maybe it was because she felt like she would betray the Leaf, or she felt Sakura wasn't in need of the information. Sakura wasn't sure. She had never really given it any extra thought. Why should she? She was too focused on learning the history of her new home village. The Leafs didn't matter. But now, obviously it did. What was it that I remember hearing about the Leafs Jinchuriki? I overheard some other ninja talking about it. They had said that a baby that had been born the night of the Leafs' major attack had the Nine Tails sealed inside of him, which is obviously Minato, aha. So, Minato is obviously not his real name. Sakura took a second to glance at Minato, or whatever his name is. So he came up with a fake name too. What would make him want to choose Minato? Surely, I've heard his real name mentioned before. I mean, he's the Leafs Jinchuriki. Did those ninja mention him too? Maybe it started with an N. That rings a bell. It feels like it's on the tip of my tongue. I call myself a master in and I can't even remember details about my home village. At least I came to one realization. By the end of her thoughts, Sakura and Minato found themselves at the village gates. They continued walking deeper into the forest. You've been really quiet. Is something bothering you? Minato sounded sincere. Oh, why does this have to be so hard? Sakura took a deep breath. Bite me. Minato's eyes widened and then narrowed. His nice, calming demeanor vanished. Sakura's stomach sank. Ya know, I'm trying to see things from your point of view, but I just can't seem to get my head that far up my. Sakura could have sworn her heart stopped beating for a second. This must have been what he felt like this morning and just a few seconds ago. Why don't you slip into something more comfortable, like a coma? Minato suddenly stopped walking. Stop. Listen. I think I just heard a rustling. Maybe it's Sakura. He became excited again. Shock me. Say something intelligent. Sakura pretended to roll her eyes. No. I swear I just saw blonde hair. Well, good for you. Go chase it. Why are you still standing there? Minato took off at a sprint, Sakura following closely after. Good job. Sakura. Ha. I saw her. Woohoo. If you keep yelling like that, she's going to be gone before you blink again. Naruto. He took off in a sprint towards Sakura. His smiling grin suddenly turning into a frown as followed her. She had evaded him long enough, and today was going to be the day he finally caught her and ended his mission. Ayumi was following at a distance. He assumed it was because she was more cautious of the foe ahead. The figure he was following blurred as she kicked up snow in the air when she ran. He wiped his watering eyes and continued his pursuit, determined not to let her slip from his grasp again. Sakura took a sharp left into a small clearing. He followed suit as he threw up snow when he changed direction. He stopped when his target did, his cloak fluttering to the side as he glared at her. Finally decided to stand and fight, huh? He called out. Oh, please, leave Shinobi, you would hardly be a challenge. She spoke for the first time, her voice harsh and oddly familiar. You wanna bet? Naruto reached behind him, his hand hovering over his weapon's pouch. The blonde girl stood smirking at him in the clearing, her hand gripping the hilt of her sword as he approached her slowly. When he neared the edge of the clearing, she tucked tail and ran again. Frustrated, Naruto leapt into a run again after her. Pay up. Sakura joked with a sickening smile on her face as she stood on the other side of the clearing. You lose. That was when he felt his ankle snag on something. Naruto stopped at once and looked about him with surprise. It happened all at once. The line of string that snagged him broke in two as a heated fire surrounded the clearing, the flames trapping him in a small circle. Sakura stood facing him on the other side of the inferno with a smirk plastered to her face. The flicking flames only added to her sinister expression. Whistling filled the air as hundreds of Senbon rained down on him, seemingly out of nowhere. His eyes moved side to side as he surveyed the threat and their points of impact, all of which were aimed at main arteries and limbs. His lips pulled back into a straight line as he ground his teeth together in concentration. He knew why she did this. The small circle of fire prevented him from dodging or even moving for that fact. No matter what he did, he would be hit. Naruto quickly drew his katana, swinging the blade around trying to block the needles. Metal bounced of his sword as he brought his katana up to stop a Senbon from embedding itself in his face. But no matter how fast he swung his sword, he knew he could not get them all. It was a thin blade he was working with. The little pinpricks hit the metal of his katana when he blocked them from hitting their mark on the main artery in the back of his knee. Pain exploded in his forearms as Senbon succeeded and made it through his defenses. A needle slipped off the edge of his blade and ricocheted into his shoulder. Everything was in slow motion as he adjusted his body to the right to avoid two Senbon to the heart. But to those watching, he imagined he looked like a blur. The ground was covered in long needles. It was a sea of thin metal. He rotated his katana to the side to block a stray Senbon aimed for his side and brought the weapon up again in a ready position. Naruto glanced upward seeing that the alt had stopped. How did I miss the trip wire? He muttered angrily at his own foolish stupidity. His heart was already beating widely. Suddenly he felt great pain hit his heart as it rose. His eyes bulged, as a burning pain became known in his arms. He felt his katana slip through his open fingers as his body became horribly weak. Naruto's eyesight blurred as he dropped to one knee in the fallen Senbon trying to remain awake. Each beat of his heart brought another dose of heavy burning inside of him, like a raging inferno was flowing through his veins. What is happening to me? Naruto struggled to say, his jaw clutching tightly in pain. Naruto placed his hand on the dirt trying to keep his body up. He looked down at the sharp pieces of metal and noticed their tips were either green or purple. His eyes turned to look at his forearm with Senbon sticking sickly out of his flesh. Shit. Poison, he observed, staring at his forearm. His body leaned forward and he caught himself from falling over. Every second, the poison was being pumped closer and closer to his heart and brain. Damn it. My rash decisions are actually going to kill me this time, he managed out before he couldn't focus anymore, his words already slurred. Naruto felt himself fall over onto his side, throwing the metal up in the air slightly when he landed on the scattered Senbon. He watched the fire that surrounded him and saw Ayumi on the other side. She attempted to push through the fire, but it flared up and she had to retreat. It was then he realized the fire wasn't to keep him in, but to also keep her out so she couldn't help him. He wondered if Sakura had already made a run for it, pleased with her work. Kid. A deep voice growled from deep within his subconscious. You are going to die if you don't remove the poison. Naruto smiled slightly. No shit. The fox ignored his comment. Use your katana to cut open your forearms and anywhere else you were hit. You have to bleed out the poisoned blood before it gets to your heart. Won't I just bleed out after that? Naruto commented, pushing himself up a little but still down. My chakra can help heal your wounds, but I can't help if I'm going to be trapping the poison inside of you. The fox informed him. Hurry. Soon you will lose the function of your arms. This poison was having such a weird effect on him. For some reason, he didn't want to get up and save himself. Hell, didn't he deserve it? How many people has he killed this way? Naruto mentally shook his head, while he battled with his conscience. He was delirious. The poison was confusing him. Naruto, you sitting by and doing nothing is helping the poison flow. Get up. The fox was becoming impatient and more irritated that Naruto was endangering the fox's life. Naruto finally did push his body up in a sitting position. His Senbon-filled forearm draped over his bent knee. He reached over to grab his fallen weapon and tried to control his shaking hand. His fingers wrapped around the hilt of the blade. His eyelids droopy, Naruto dragged the blade across the dirt and scattered metal. Concentrating, he held out his left forearm. Using the blade, he cut open his black undershirt to see the damage. Naruto could see how far the poison had traveled in his bloodstream by the dark areas in the vein. Grinding his teeth together, he pointed the blade down at his arm. He stopped, his mind still fogged over. The poison is in the main vein. He struggled to stay focused. If I cut it, not even you can put it back together. Naruto said out into the air to the fox. Your survival chances are better if you cut it. I'll seal the opening of your skin. It's better to bleed inside of yourself than outside. You will lose the feeling in your arms, however, because of the loss of blood. You know some medical ninjutsu, But if you're not confident, your companion appears to be a medical nin, maybe she can do the rest. The fox growled. Naruto gazed back down at his left forearm. 3 Senbon stuck out on top of his arm as he flipped it over to see the vein on his underarm. He positioned the blade above the end of the poison and the blood that was not infected yet. Sighing and relaxing his body, he stabbed the weapon in his forearm and drew it down quickly. Almost immediately blood sprayed from his forearm as he held his arm out and away from himself. With his right hand still holding his katana, he pulled out each Senbon on his left arm. The metal made a sharp sound as he dropped them on the ground, hitting the other needles. A pool of blood had formed from his bleeding arm, the feeling slowly going away. Naruto pulled his injured up arm to see if it was almost over. Some poison was still near the base of his wrists and Naruto used his thumb to push it towards the opening. Total feeling in his arm was gone as the remains of the poisoned blood left his body. Dropping his katana, he placed his hand over the opening of his wound. The poison is out, fox. He kept his hand positioned over the wound trying to keep the good blood in. Feeling slightly better, his mind began to wrap around how crazy this was. Naruto felt the tickling sensation as his skin sewed itself together. Soon, however, He felt nothing at all, for feeling disappeared in his arm. He removed his hand to stare at his now unharmed forearm. Naruto began to search the rest of his body for Senbon. He spotted one from his shoulder where it ricocheted. He moved his blade up to point at the wound, but then stopped and lowered his weapon. Fox, I can't see the vein much yet, feel my fingers holding the sword. Naruto commented, his mind clouding up again. Must I do everything for you? You got some chakra left, yes. Make a shadow clone to do it for you. Hurry. Your body is reacting to the blood loss by pumping blood faster, trying to make more. The faster it pumps, the faster the poison spreads. The deep voice growled before going dormant. Not my fault, I can't focus. Yay. That's the word. Naruto corrected himself drowsily. With his own good hand, Naruto performed his shadow clone technique, forming a single replica of him. The clone appeared. Its face held a serious expression as it bent over to take the katana from Naruto. Wasting no time, the clone grabbed a hold of the black jumpsuit material and ripped it apart to show his skin on his shoulder. Naruto felt the clone pull the Senbon from his shoulder and toss the needle to the ground. He then felt the cool metal press against his bare skin. 3, 2, 1. The clone read out to him before sliding the weapon down his skin. Naruto felt his back and what was left of his black undershirt become wet and sticky with his blood. After only a moment, 2 hands pressed themselves on his wound. Unable to hold the clone anymore due to his bleeding out, it dispersed as Naruto took over, his right hand holding his bleeding shoulder. The fox repeated its actions and began to close up his self-inflicted wound. I'm going to pee out, aren't I? Naruto observed the edges around his vision already blackening. The fox didn't answer. Naruto took that as a sign that he was done talking to him. Glancing around at the scene before him, Naruto picked up one of the Senbon that didn't find its mark. He turned the needle around in his index finger and thumb, analyzing it. The tip was a light purple with green dots about it inside the liquid. His eyebrows pulled together in deep thought. Some part of his brain was remembering something about this liquid, but the fog was clouding it. After another minute, when he felt his vision darken even more, the memory came to him. Naruto grabbed a hold of the rogue's wrist and pinned it behind his spine as he slammed the rogue to the ground. The man grunted in pain, but his lopsided smile remained on his face. What the hell have you done to my teammate? Naruto yelled in anger, glaring down at the man. The rogue smiled innocently. He's a goner. Might try looking for a new teammate, Leaf Shinobi. Naruto glanced back over at his fallen teammate, a kunai sticking out the back of his neck. The Leaf Nin was unconscious, his hand still clasped around the kunai in his neck. Purple liquid and green dots covered the blade of the weapon in his teammate's neck. Blood was seeping from his mouth, his body limp. Naruto fumed just looking at his partner. The blonde-haired Junin removed his katana and placed the blade under the man's throat. What was on that kunai? Last chance before I cover this floor with your blood. Naruto snarled. Poison, he said simply, a smirk forming along his lips. Naruto pulled the blade higher to the side of his neck and pressed down, drawing blood. You are with the wrong person. Naruto cautioned him. What was in that poison? The rogue struggled slightly, form under Naruto. My village's specialty and only used by my hometown. He stopped, then turned his head to gaze at Naruto. You can't kill me, Leaf Shinobi. If you do, you will never know the cure for your friend. He taunted Naruto. Naruto's tense muscles relaxed as a small smile formed across his face. Watch me, he whispered to the rogue. The rogue's eyes widened just as Naruto put extreme pressure on the sword and slid it across the man's throat. Blood covered the once clean floor as Naruto stood up, letting go of the rogue's now limp hand. He placed his katana back into its oscillator on his back and turned to his fallen teammate. Come on, Hiroki. We have to hurry back to get you fixed. Naruto told the unconscious man before positioning him on his back and taking off back towards the leaf. Sakura. The fire had begun to die down. Sakura's heartbeat began increasing dramatically. The moment of truth, she thought. Over the top of the fire she could see Minato's body limp on the ground. She let out a sigh. Sakura picked up handfuls of snow and lightly threw them to cover the fire. After 5 minutes half of the fire was put out, enough for her to reach the body safely. She sat down on the ground beside Minato. A single tear slid down her cheek. Wait, is his chest moving? Sakura's eyes widened. No, 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 no. This was supposed to work. She checked his pulse only to have her suspicion confirmed. What do I do? The poison was supposed to work. Think, Sakura. What was your backup plan? Oh yeah. Sakura looked to the side, past the fire, past the trees. She steadily calmed her breathing and controlled herself. Taking out a kunai from her pouch, she turned her attention back to Minato. Slowly, she moved the tip of the kunai closer to his neck. She let out a steady breath before the tip of the kunai sunk into the flesh of his neck. But she held it in place while it was only 5 millimeters in, only enough to draw a small amount of blood. Sakura, why are you faltering? Her brain was yelling at her, kill him now. You could end it and be back in your village in no time for that well-deserved vacation. But her heart was softly cooing, you can't kill him. He's the only one you've ever loved. You may never find another. Sakura took a minute to just stare at Minato, the perfection proportion of his face, the small hint of laugh lines that were beginning to form, his long dark eyelashes which she envied, and of course, his shaggy, messy blonde hair, her favorite feature. Then, Sakura threw the kunai across the clearing to have it hit the center of a tree. She quickly unzipped Minato's jacket flat. Then she picked up his left forearm and set it in her lap. While placing her hands on the spot that the Senbon punctured, she channeled her chakra to her hands and allowed the pale green light to envelope them. She checked and made sure every drop of poison was removed from his system. She then did the same to the spot on his shoulder. When she was done, she continued to stare at him. She felt absolutely pathetic. What was she supposed to tell the Mizukage? Sorry, I accidentally fell in love with the guy you told me to kill while fooling him into chasing his target, who was actually me. Please forgive me, I won't do it again. Minato's head twitched at that moment. He must be waking up. Before she could stop herself, she slowly ran her fingers through his hair. She softly whispered, now what am I going to do about you? Naruto. The darkness was fading. It was like you were awake and could hear everything but yet your body was unresponsive. His mind was blank. Naruto remembered the trap but everything after the initial hit was gone. Almost like the poison took some of his memory away. Only bits and pieces were left but none of them added up. I must have pet out, Naruto thought to himself. Panic filled him as he remembered his partner. Ayumi. Is she okay? He thought in horror. What if Sakura had gotten to her? His panic increased his heart rate. It awakened his body as his eyelids slowly fluttered open to see Ayumi by his side. She was sitting next to him, her fingers on the bridge of her nose looking completely stressed. His eyes left her for a moment to see where he was. He was on his back with his arms out beside him. His green flak jacket was unzipped, unlikely from his doing. He rose to lean over his bent legs, his body numb. Naruto's eyes roamed over the scattered Senbon trying to recall exactly what happened. Did she get away? He asked his companion as he ran his fingers through his hair. Yes, Ayumi answered simply without emotion. He stifled a laugh and turned to rest his blue eyes on her. Don't tell me you saved my again. Because we just now got even. Feeling his eyes on her, Ayumi turned her head away from him, biting the inside of her cheek. Naruto smiled at the cute move before the very action jogged his memory. The move was all too familiar in some way. He just couldn't put his finger on it. She smiled while looking at the ground as she continued to bite the inside of her mouth. It happened then. His entire mind focused on that same action over and over in his head. He was sucked back in a flashback of standing in Tsunade's office. You will meet up with the Mist Nin in Frost Country. From there you will explain the mission. Tsunade said. Attire. What you're wearing. It will be easier for the Mist Ninja to know. She pointed to his army green vest. I do have a certain piece of information that may or may not be helpful. She did have a nervous tick. She would chew the inside of her mouth when she got jumpy or scared. She made it pretty obvious too. He reopened his eyes in surprise. He felt confusion, fear, and a lot of other emotions flow through him, hammering his nerves like live wire. He moved his head to stare at the ground, trying to piece together the reasons why Ayumi could not be Sakura. Nothing came up. She couldn't, could she? That time when you sacrificed your life to save hers, his mind pointed out. Her medical ninjutsu healed your wound effortlessly. And when you asked her about it, she brushed it off. When you first told her the target's name, she reacted a little strange. She excused herself soon after, as if something was wrong. The accusations in his head helped reveal his memory of what happened during the Senbon alt, his realization before ping out. Ayumi and Sakura are both Mist Nin. The other part of his brain rolled its eyes at Naruto's thought. No, Ayumi is Sakura. Sakura is a Mist Nin. But the blonde girl. Part of his mind fought to prove Ayumi was not his target. Why do you think the blonde girl always disappears before you can get her, Naruto? His mind asked. It's because it's a clone. It explains why Ayumi is always so out of it, always tired after an encounter with the blonde. Her clone uses up a lot of her chakra. If she knew he was after her, why didn't she run? Why did she go to all the trouble of deceiving him? Hello, Minato. You still there? Ayumi waved her head in front of his face. Breaking out of his daze, he offered a sly smile. Yay. Sorry. Just thinking. He was so confused. Never in his life has he felt so conflicted. Kill her. She didn't hesitate to kill you. Remember the poison-tipped Senbon, or have you already forgotten? His mind screamed. No, another part said. Give her one last test. With inhuman speed, Naruto flipped open his kunai pouch and threw one straight at her head. In slow motion she leaned over to wipe something off her foot and the metal hit the tree behind her. She didn't even flinch, just sat back up staring at him. He couldn't tell what she was thinking. Her expression was so damn unreadable. Hey, just playing with you. He heard himself chuckle awkwardly. She relaxed slightly, but her eyes never left him. It's her. Ayumi of the Hidden Mist is Sakura Haruno. She had deceived him and he fell for it. He had to kill her before she killed him. He felt his teeth pierce the inside of his lower lip. Then why did it feel as if his insides were ripping apart at the very thought of it? Despite the fact she deceived him, he couldn't imagine killing her. Things had taken an unexpected twist and they were just beginning to become more than friends, or so he thought. Naruto was being pulled in two directions, one by the hand of his brain and the other by the hand of his heart. He was led on. It was more likely that she had faked everything just to kill him. And yet, he fell for it. It was the realest thing he had ever experienced in his life. He shook his head slightly so not even the human eye could detect it. You are an in. Don't break the second rule of your job. Never let emotion get in your way, it would make you weak. It was only a matter of time and he couldn't keep this act up much longer. Dang. It got hot fast. He told her, shuffling out of his cloak, letting it fall to the forest floor. That was a lie. It was cold as hell. He only wanted to free his katana from the cloth that covered it. He yawned and scratched the back of his head near the base of his neck. This is it. This is your chance. As Naruto fake scratched his neck, his hand moved over to grasp the handle of the blade. In that same second, he pulled it out and swung it down on Ayumi, or Sakura. The hand clutching the blade was met with swift resistance. Sakura had grabbed his wrist before the katana could touch her. Her left hand was gripping his wrist tightly, suspending his attack, while her right hand was already behind her, clutching the hilt of her sword. For those few seconds they stared at each other in a stalemate. Naruto stared into her green eyes with deep intensity, but she didn't glance away. Everything was ping between them, all the lies and truth behind it. His eyes narrowed as her lips flipped over into a frown. He knew the moment that she realized her cover was blown because those green eyes suddenly became dull. In the next few seconds, they were off on their feet, metal clashing against metal. Her weapon was much longer than his and even thinner, but he was convinced it didn't give her the upper hand. He slammed his katana against her blade once more. Well, this is a pleasant surprise, huh? Sakura didn't answer. Instead, she rolled over her weapon out from under his and slashed at one of his legs. He jumped back to avoid the blow. Answer me, Sakura, he yelled, fury rising within him from all of the lies. She faltered a bit at the sound of her true name, but kept coming at him. He made a move to disarm her by bringing his blade down on hers roughly with two hands. But Sakura was waiting for it. She moved her sword out of the way and came up with it, barely missing his jugular. He was forced to retreat a couple of steps back. I should have known. How could I have been so blind? Naruto yelled at her. Metal scraped against metal as their swords became a blur as their fighting stance picked up the pace. Why didn't you run away? He asked her over the sound of metal. You knew I was ignorant to kill you. Why did you stay? Naruto yelled when their two swords were suspended in the air as both sides fought to push the others over. Finally speaking, she replied through her teeth. I had my reasons. She yanked her weapon free of the standoff and came at him again. Why must you be so difficult? Naruto yelled, hitting her blade harder each time he made contact. Just tell me. She answered, not in words but her actions. Her sword came down towards him and he had no choice but to block it. His katana being only a single side blade, he was able to hold the back of the blade with his left hand as he blocked her what could have been fatal blow. Why? He yelled again, blocking another one of her blows. As the tender side of him tried to find her reason for staying, the dark side of him was already pointing out all the ways to kill her. Naruto noticed her weapon was a dual blade. That meaning she couldn't block with both hands without cutting into her hand. His instincts picking up, he moved into an offense position to force her to block with both hands. He moved a step forward with each hit, but she never backed down. He shifted his katana over into his right hand while he pulled a kunai from the pouch around his waist. He threw the metal at her at the same time he brought the katana down on her sword. Unbelievably, Sakura blocked the kunai and as it bounced of her sword. At the same time she stopped the advance of his katana by catching the weight of it on her sword. It was then he realized she would be one of the hardest opponents he would ever face. Her swordsmanship was amazing. This girl was undoubtedly Sakura Haruno. Metal resumed clashing against metal. They both fought for dominance, neither side wanting to lose ground. Naruto wondered just how long this dance would go on. But then, he saw his way out. There was an above-ground route behind Sakura. If he could just push her back a couple of feet, he could trip her. Why? He yelled, slamming his weapon into hers. He yelled each word with each blow. You. She stumbled backwards from the force of it. Stay. Sakura's foot collided with the upward route. Her eyes widened as it caused her to stumble backwards. I got you now, Naruto told her, bending his knees and bringing his katana down on her. Think again. He heard her shout as his katana hit her sword on the tip, causing his blade to slide off and go deep into the ground. With her sitting on the ground and him bending over with his weapon stuck in the dirt, Sakura kicked him in the stomach, flipping him over onto his back. He felt the handle of his blade leave his hands as Sakura landed on top of him, straddling his waist. It would have been provocative, if it weren't for her sword held high about to descend on his skull. Reacting quickly, he caught her hands that were holding the blade, preventing her from getting him. She was able to disarm and pin him at the same time. Shit. That was too close. He smiled at her as they struggled. Really, Minato? That's all you can say? She told him, pushing down harder, gaining an inch. Just tell me why, sweet cheeks. He mocked her, his muscles straining. Isn't it obvious? She asked as if he was retarded. Obviously not, Naruto told her, his muscles burning from the force of keeping her at bay. I was sent to kill you. It was my mission, she told him through clenched teeth. It was strange. He didn't even react to the new information. Almost like he always knew. He smiled his signature grin. It still is, you idiot. She said as her weapon ascending closer to his head. Two ins sent to kill one another. I wonder how this story will end. He said out loud, his eyes calm. Want a spoiler alert? Sakura asked, her blade now touching his cheek, cutting into his face like a paper cut. Only if you can handle watching yourself die. He told her, using all his might to push her blade up away from his face, then jerk her arms to the side, causing her to fall off him. You know, if I was your wife, I'd serve you poison. She shouted. Naruto jumped to his feet and backed away from her, learning his lesson from before. If I was your husband, I'd drink it. He eyed his blade, which was still stuck firmly upright into the ground. His katana was a lost cause at the moment. He watched her get up as he grabbed another kunai from his pouch and raised it shoulder level in defense. Sakura smirked, rotating her blade in her hands. Is that all you got? Oh, you really should not have said that. Naruto smiled and threw his kunai up into the air. While her eyes followed the weapon, he made a few quick hand signs. The kunai fell back down to earth as he caught it in his mouth and performed the jutsu. Cage number Bushin Jutsu. He yelled through the handle in his mouth as over 100 clones of him faced Sakura from all directions. At will they all attacked her. It was a huge stampede as the M of green, black and blonde hid her pink hair from sight. He smiled, straightening out his back and pulling the kunai from his mouth. There is no way she is getting out of that unscathed. A tap on his shoulder sent fear through his nerves as he turned to face the pink-haired Miss Nin. Tag. You're it, she yelled, punching him square in the jaw, sending him flying. As he flew through the air, she appeared above him, her blade raised. She began to bring her sword down on his stomach as he quickly formed a substitution jutsu and pulled himself out of that situation. Naruto was now 200 yards away. He was hiding behind a tree, breathing heavily, watching her look around for him. Sliding down the tree he was leaning against, he cursed. His body felt weak. Why was that? He searched his body for any wounds but found none. Naruto's eyes widened, looking down at his arm, noticing a black seal. What the? He said, looking closer. He had seen this seal before, used on one of his comrades. Now what did it do again? Naruto jumped to his feet in surprise. Shit. It drains chakra. She did come prepared. The mist in her must have known of the chakra the fox gives him. His eyes narrowed at the thought in his head. The seal couldn't be removed. How did she get close enough to get me? His mind flashed back to when she punched him in the face. Damn it. Her other hand must have placed it. Naruto sighed and looked for a distraction. He needed to fight a way to remove it. He glanced to his side and saw that one of his clones was still active. Minato. You can't hide forever, she sang. When he made no move to show himself, she continued, you know, I've been wondering why you've chosen the name Minato since this morning. Care to enlighten me? Shit. She figured that out too. My name is not Minato. My name is Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. His clone yelled to her, a smile playing along his lips. He watched her and waited for her to move towards the clone. But she didn't. Instead, Sakura placed her blade back in its oscillator and closed her eyes in concentration. What was she up to? That technically didn't answer my question, Naruto, she replied. Always gotta be a smart. He leaned over from behind the tree to get a better look. With her eyes closed, Sakura began to form a huge amount of hand signs. What the? Naruto said to himself. Sweden. Kyojin Nami Shushiki. Water release. Giant wave crash. He heard her yell, her eyes reopening. A huge wave of water, 10 stories tall maybe, rose into the air seemingly out of nowhere and headed out in all directions. Holy shit. This is going to get bad before it gets better. He yelled, turning and jumping onto the trees away from the wall of water quickly approaching him. He heard the cracking and snapping of trees as the wave rolled over them like they were just twigs. Shit, shit, shit. He cursed to himself as he increased his pace tenfold. The water only gained speed as he heard the rushing current. He could even feel water droplets as it approached him and bit at his heels. He pushed off a tree just as if gave way over the force of the water. The next tree he was going to land on was yanked from its roots as he fell into the giant wave of water. Going under, he balled up in order to protect himself from being ripped apart. Every now and then the water would push him upwards and he was able to swallow a breath of fresh air before being sucked back under again. He didn't know how long the wave carried him, but he felt it lighten up and trees were no longer breaking under the impact of it. As he floated over to a tall maple tree, he opened his arms up and clutched to it for dear life. The water began to die out as the level of it dropped below him. Naruto leaned his soaked body back against the tree as he sat watching the water go down on a limb of the maple tree. His bangs clung to his face. Annoyed, he shook his head side to side, getting rid of the water like a dog. As much as he wanted to, Naruto knew he couldn't sit here forever. Sakura would no doubt be looking for him. She had just demonstrated a small ounce of her power and he worried what else she has up her sleeve. He would have to end this. End his mission. He had to, or she would end him. A plan began to form in his head as he pulled himself up from the tree limb. Forming another clone, he jumped down to the wet ground. What's the plan? His clone inquired, smiling. You are going to pretend to be dying. Naruto told him, motioning towards the ground. Lay down and appear as if you had drowned. She may have been pretending to like me, but I know she is not completely emotionless. Not talking anymore, the clone laid in the wet gr. He opened his mouth and his face scrunched up to appear to be in pain. The real Naruto nodded and hid himself behind a nearby tree. He reduced his chakra signature and poured most of his and some of the foxes into the clone. Once he had a steady stream going, he put his right arm down in a ready position. It was only a matter of time now. Naruto, come out wherever you are. He heard her call from a distance. Light footsteps grew louder before falling short. His lips pulled back in a half smile as she approached his body. Sakura's face was filled with many emotions. More than he could name. No more games. No more stalling. All the lies and the fake truth was going to fade along with the light in her eyes. He was going to end it and end her. He had joked with her up until this point and it was him who was putting off the inevitable. One of them was going to die tonight and it sure as hell was not going to be him. When she crossed the invisible boundary he had set up in his mind, he knew it was now or never. His left hand came up slowly to grip the forearm of his right arm. He then opened his right hand showing his palm. Sidestepping out of the tree line he charged at her. Rasengan. The spiraling ball of chakra formed in his hand as he ran. Naruto thrust it forward just as Sakura turned around. Then something weird happened. He believed she jumped to the side to dodge his attack, but it was too late. Her left shoulder and forearm was caught in the jutsu. Blood flew in the air, her blood. The Rasengan doesn't cut, it grinds, he remembered as the spiraling ball left her arm and depleted. As he fell past her, she jumped backwards out of his way. I trusted you and you betrayed me, Sakura. How dare you play with my emotions? He shouted, his anger of the whole situation getting the better of him. A sharp pain brought him back to his senses. It was in his lower back. Reaching his arm around, he yanked out a kunai embedded into his lower back. Dropping the bloodied weapon, he gazed over at Sakura. She must have stabbed him as he hit her with the Rasengan. She was holding onto her forearm, blood seeping out between her fingers as they stared at each other. How dare you use the fourth Hokage's name? Didn't think I would remember the fourth Hokage of the village I was born in. She hissed, anger clouding her eyes. He drew his second to last kunai from his pouch and faced her once more. You going to attack me, sweet cheeks? Or will I have to? He said angrily, his voice no longer joking. Before she could answer, he was in front of her, his sharpened metal digging into the top of her shoulder blade. The metal sank into her flesh as she cried out in pain before bringing her own kunai towards his stomach. He was already yelling out in agony before her blade hit him. Naruto didn't know why his body reacted that way. He tried to sidestep, but she held on to him as her weapon hit the far side of his stomach. The force of it knocking him on his as he stared up at her, his hand wrapped around the kunai that was still sticking out of him. He felt blood run down the side of his lips and fall to the ground. She had retreated, yanking the metal out of her flesh and placed her hand over the wound as a green light surrounded it. And here he was brought back into the stages of his mind as his blood boiled. A girl he had once trusted. Betrayed him. A girl he had once protected. Betrayed him. A girl he had once begun to like. Betrayed him. She had turned his kindness into a mockery and used it against him. Never again will he let someone get so close then tear themselves out. I will kill you, he told her, his right hand pulling up, removing the weapon from his stomach. Blood spilled over his green vest, as the weapon no longer blocked the flow of his blood. Naruto rose to his feet just as Sakura dropped her hand from her wound. Not if I get to you first. She returned, just as fierce. They faced each other, two rising tides determined to wash the other out. Blood covered the green GR just as it had in his dream. Nice job. You already tried once and failed. He pointed out, his anger threatening to boil over. Her eyes narrowed in hatred. Twice. You didn't even notice the first one. Twice. Surprise barely hit him as the anger toward himself covered it. He was so stupid to have let his guard down. Didn't matter. Huh. Because you still couldn't complete your mission. He put his arms out open at her. 3 strikes and you're out, huh? Naruto frowned at her then smiled wickedly. All I need is 1. No one could have predicted what would happen next. They had the intent of killing each other. And they were going to do it, no matter what the costs. He pushed off his feet and ran towards her. Odama Rasengan. A huge spiraling ball of chakra erupted from the palm of his hand. Sweden. Hahenryu. Water style. Destruction torrent. A large amount of water exploded out of her hand as both of their jutsus met head-on. Sweden. Gufu Suika. Water style. Typhoon water vortex. He heard her yell before his jutsu seemed to cancel out as the water from her palm surrounded him, trapping him in a wall of spiraling water. His eyes widened. How was that possible? His jutsu just was sucked up in hers. How? The water closed in on him from all sides. He was trapped as the rushed towards him. No. He heard a voice shout, but the cry was soon muffled out by the crashing of the water. He struggled to contain himself from being ripped apart by the current. That was before everything went black. Wake up, kid. A deep voice commanded him. His eyesight blurred as he opened his eyes ever so slowly. Rolling his head to the direction of the voice, Naruto realized where he was. You almost drowned. I've saved your body. Your chakra is low and you are now running on mine. The voice informed him. How? He asked weakly. Her last jutsu is a special technique that uses a wind style, Rasengan and water style, destruction torrent to cause a hurricane-like typhoon. In short, that mist nin used your own jutsu against you for her own benefit, the deep voice said, sounding disappointed. Unable to return to his feet, he laid where he was. Take me back. Not before you realize why you are fighting. I know why I'm fighting. Naruto told the voice angrily. No, you don't. Tell me why you couldn't make the finishing blow in the first Rasengan. She jumped out of the way in time. Naruto told him, annoyed. No, she didn't. You were about to deliver the fatal blow, but at the last second you averted your path, hitting her in the forearm. Why does this matter, Fox? Naruto sighed. You know the answer to your own question. Naruto closed his eyes, letting his thoughts clear of all that was happening. Why did he change course of his jutsu? Even if he didn't remember it. He tried to remember the feeling of running at her with the full intent of killing her. It scared him. Not for him but for her. He didn't want to hurt her. He wanted the opposite. Instead he wanted to protect her. He wanted to protect the very thing that was trying to kill him. He was wrong about everything. He lied to himself and his emotions tried to warn him, but he always looked the other way. Naruto had already destroyed the second and now he had broken the number one rule and should always follow. Well, I can't kill her, Naruto said out loud mostly to himself. Why not? The deep voice asked, but it was obvious he already knew the answer. Naruto knew the fox just wanted him to admit it to himself. Because I love her, he responded as his current surroundings faded and his state of mind was being dragged back into reality. He coughed up water from his lungs and couldn't stop it from spilling out of his mouth as he rolled over onto his side. The pain in his throat was fading rapidly. So was the pain in all of his wounds. He had already lost count of how many times she landed a hit on him. Naruto glanced down at the puddle of water beside where he laid. Water was mixed with bright red blood. As he looked past it, his reflection showed a monster. His eyes were not his, but the fox's. His teeth were already sharpening by the second and the lines along his cheeks were getting darker and deeper. Black was dipping down from the sides of his mouth and outlined his eyes. He knew he had control over the fox. It just had been a while since he was forced to resort to using its chakra. Naruto pushed off his arms and slowly stood up, leaving his arms dangling. He was still dazed by his own confession. How would this work? He never realized he had fallen for Ayumi, Sakura. It was clear she didn't feel the same for him. Would he roll over and let her kill him? He shook his head at the thought. Ordered to kill someone he loved. Was it even possible to do such a thing? His was torn, literally. Holding one of his arms was the leaf, the Hokage, the people he swore to protect, and emotions such as pride, responsibility, and shame. While clutching his other arm, by itself, was the emotion of love. An emotion he had never had, and yet the effect was so strong. From the blood-stained battlefield to the darkest part of himself that he had ever known, he always believed that one day he'd die in battle. There was only one option. He really hoped she felt nothing for him. It had to end this way. Acceptance rested on his head and he was determined that he would die by her hand. With that, he would never disgrace his village or endanger her life any further. Simple, really. He could handle and live with that decision. The only problem was the fox. He would have to overpower and suppress the fox long enough for Sakura to end him. He turned around to face Sakura, who stood staring at him like he had risen from the grave. Her green eyes showed concentration, determination and a little fear. She reached behind her and drew her sword and placed it in both of her hands. So, this is the Jinchuriki. The nine-tailed fox that almost destroyed the leaf so many years back. She spoke, her words not faltering. Naruto smiled slightly, ashamed. At that moment he began to close off the fox's chakra, letting more of his take over. No, Sakura, it's just me. He concentrated on closing more of the flow of chakra before a force stopped him. Well, not stop. It tried to resist. Stop suppressing me, the fox ordered inside his head. She is still draining your chakra and you are dangerously low already. Naruto shook his head. I don't need you, fox. I can handle this myself. It started with me and it will end with me. So hard-headed. Whichever. You will be forced to use mine if this continues. The fox informed him before slipping back into silence. It was like the fox was unaware of his plans. Even better. Looking back up, he noticed Sakura was gone. She appeared in front of him, her blade coming down into the front of his face. Faster than human speed, he clapped his hands around the blade, catching it and stopping it in midair. Naruto's hands were in a prayer-like position and he smirked at Sakura's shocked expression. Scary, right? He asked her before letting go of the blade and jumping to the side. She tried again, her blade inching past his face. Her attacks continued, but each attempt ended like the first. Another blow aimed for his stomach. He caught the weapon in his hands before it could carry through. Sakura jumped back away from him. She was panting, obviously tried and running low on chakra. Taking a deep breath, she straightened out her back. Naruto, she said, using his real name as if she knew no other. He froze. The way she said it was almost like back at the hot springs. He knew she was using it against him, but now that he realized he loved her, it worked like a charm. In his moment of distraction, Naruto felt a cold blade press itself against his neck. The blade touched his jugular, drawing a slight speck of blood. "You kill me, Sakura, and I kill you," Naruto informed her, and he felt her move to look down. True, he wasn't really distracted when she moved behind him. Once she did, he pulled out a kunai and held it on his back so the tip was touching her stomach. Once again they were at stalemate, each one trapped by the other's weapon. Both seemed hesitant to make a move. Wounds covered their bodies, even with the fox and her medical ninjutsu. He gazed at the blood covering her right arm where she held the blade. Her shoulder was bleeding badly. His insides churned knowing that he was the one who did that to her. "Why are you still fighting?" he asked her, looking up at the sky and the clouds ping by. "I have to complete my mission," she said simply. "You can't, you know. I know you are smart, smarter than me. You have planned every move so well and you already know how this will end. I may not come off very smart, but Sakura, I do know there is a reason you have gone back to fighting with your sword. Your chakra is low and you have already realized in this situation you have no chance, for you have lost your element of surprise," Naruto said slowly as he completely shut off the fox's chakra. The deep black lines faded and his teeth returned to his own. Without the fox's chakra, the pain from his wounds returned. His knees bent a little as he stared straight ahead. Pain from the kunai in his back, pain from the kunai to his stomach, and the overall loss of chakra consumed him. Her chakra draining jutsu still ate away the energy he still had left. He was a weak man. If he were a man, he would have completed his mission with no hesitation. But he couldn't. Just couldn't bear it. He turned to glance at her, showing her his blue eyes had once returned, and she gave him a suspicious look. He didn't want the fox to do his work for him. This was his life and his fight. She needed to see it in his eyes that he meant every word he was going to tell her. "That being said, Sakura, I have come to realize I can't kill you," he explained. An In's biggest mistake, he muttered to himself, barely audible for her to hear. The blade loosened around his neck but still remained. "Why not, Naruto? You die, I die, or both of us. You know it has to end this way. That's how it all began," she told him, her eyes giving away her lie. He turned to face forward once again, his eyes determined with his decision. "Sakura, all my life I have fought for my village and killed people that were deemed dangerous. I thought I was living a shinobi's life. But I wasn't. I was just an empty shell carrying out orders." He laughed sadly. "A broken man with nothing to live for. And then a light at the end of a dark tunnel beckoned me. And for once I realize I am not alone in this horrible profession, and yet somehow I found happiness surrounded by all the sadness." Quote. He closed his eyes, then glanced back at her, staring into her eyes before dropping his kunai that was poised at her abdomen. A small smile spread across his lips when the metal landed softly on the ground as he became completely at her mercy. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, my life didn't actually begin until I realized that I love you. Sakura, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you." The words continued to echo in her head over and over. Surely he didn't say, "I love you." He spoke the impossible words. "He loves me." Sakura tightened her grip on the sword and placed it closer to his neck. She could feel it puncture his skin. "What do I do? Should I kill him? No. Yes." A war was raging in her head. "You have to kill him. It only makes sense. It will make your life so much easier. After this mission is completed, you can take that long vacation you've been dreaming of." A tear slid down her cheek. "But I don't want to kill him. He doesn't deserve to die. This mission is absurd. I don't know what to do." Sakura held the sword against his neck for several more seconds before dropping it on the ground in front of him, when her hand began to tremble. "No. No, I can't kill you." Naruto was still for a few seconds before picking up the sword and turning around to face her. He pushed the sword to her, trying to make her grip it again. Yes, you can," he sounded angry. You have to kill me. Sakura recoiled at his aggressiveness. She returned angry as well. Do not tell me what to do, Naruto Uzumaki. I will not kill you. If you want to die, you can just take that sword and slit your own throat. Her throat tightened as she spoke the last statement. Weak men kill themselves, he stated as he threw the sword across the small clearing that they had created. You're leaving me with two options. Either you kill me or, he trailed off, struggling to find his second option. Or I could tell you that I love you too, Sakura finished for him. Naruto nodded. Yes, or you could. He paused, replaying what Sakura had just said. What? His head shot up in bewilderment. Take that back. Excuse me. Hurt shot through Sakura. Eat your words. Now. Sakura was confused. She couldn't find anger in his eyes, but fear. Who do you think you are? Telling me what to do? How dare you? You can't love me. Says who? Huh. Last time I checked I didn't have to ask you for permission to breathe. Sakura. Please. Naruto's demeanor saddened. But Sakura wasn't ready to calm down yet. Her voice lowered as she laced it with poison. If you ever tell me what to do again, you're precious. Gone. Me. Gone. You said weak men kill themselves. Well, I think weak men ask somebody else to do it for them. So don't give me that bullshit. If you want to call yourself a man, suck it up and deal with our situation. Naruto's shoulders drooped as he gave in. I guess I have no other choice, huh? No, you don't. Sakura watched as Naruto took the step that separated them and wrapped his arms around her. I'm sorry. Just promise me that if we do this, you'll never give up, you'll fight for both of us until we find the other side of the tunnel. Sakura stood up on her toes and kissed his cheek. Of course. She then wrapped her arms around Naruto's torso while pressing her cheek against his chest. They both stayed in that position for several minutes, just trying to hold on to the moment. Naruto was the first to pull away to look at Sakura. So what do we do now, boss? Sakura grinned, and then sighed. Hell if I know. Well, we'll figure it out. Naruto smiled before turning and walking away. Where are you going? A small amount of panic began to rise in Sakura. He chuckled. To sit against a tree. That fight took a lot out of me. The mention of the fight finally made Sakura aware of Naruto's condition. Damn right you're going to go sit by a tree, and while you're at it you're going to let me heal you. After another step, Naruto collapsed on the ground. What the hell? Shit. The seal. Sakura scrambled over to Naruto and dropped to her knees. As soon as she was done removing the seal, she checked his vitals. She relaxed. He was going to need a good day or so to recover, but he was going to be fine. Scratch that. Half a day. Stupid nine tails. Sakura shook her head. Ignoring her own low chakra levels, she began to heal his wounds, the hole in his stomach and in his back, both from kunai, and all of the others as well. When she was done, she picked up Naruto and carried him the rest of the way to the tree, not that it was a long distance. As she leaned her back against the tree, she laid Naruto on his back and set his head in her lap and closed her eyes. She slowly let the reality of their situation sink in. Sakura knew she should be panicking, wondering what the hell she was going to do to get out of this alive, with Naruto. But right now, she just wanted to rest, something she hasn't been able to do in months. Sakura let her head tilt back until it was resting against the tree as she sighed. She didn't move a muscle for 30 minutes, until she felt Naruto's body begin to move. As she was looking down at him, he was slowly opening his eyes. I was wondering when you were going to take that chakra seal off of me. Naruto smirked. Sakura's eyes narrowed. You remembered and you didn't tell me. He chuckled. Nah. It came to me the split second before I blacked out. Did it scare you? You'll never know. I'll take that as a yes. They stayed quiet for a few minutes. Sakura decided to let Naruto think for a while. She might as well take the time to sort through some of their options. Well, for one, we could both just never return, leaving our villages to think that we both died in battle. But, in all honesty, Naruto is the stronger one by far. There is no way that the leaf would believe that we somehow destroyed each other. I am no Jinchuriki. The mist, however, I don't know how they would respond. I'm not sure whether Mei knew she was sending me on a suicide mission, or if she actually thought I could complete it. It would take the leaf quite a while to figure out that Sakura and I were the same person. But they knew that a mist nin was Naruto's partner. They would start there and eventually figure it out. Another option is for Naruto to return and have his mission completed, while I could enter the village after a month or so as a new person and completely give myself a new identity. But then I would have to give up being a kunoichi because they would question my loyalty to the leaf, and there is nothing else I'm better at. And it would have to be at least a year before Naruto and I could announce our relationship because he would have to have plenty of time to meet me for the first time and get to know each other. We could both go to our separate villages and claim we completed our mission and then leave during the night and never return. But Naruto is a Jinchuriki, they would never let him just become a rogue. Nobody would stop until they found us and killed us, because they would put 2 and 2 together and figure out that neither of us actually died. We could always explain to our cages our situation and hope they understand and allow us to leave in peace. Yay, right. That would more likely result in a war. Or, we could both commit suicide. Sakura continued thinking until the sun had set behind the trees. It created a dim lighting. She glanced down at Naruto. How was it that she had gone from the intent of killing this man, to figuring out he was the love of her life? Just hours ago, she was plotting his death and now she's sitting here thinking of ways to prevent it, and not just his, but hers as well. She smiled gently to herself. I love this feeling. This feeling of being wanted. She slowly ran her fingers through his hair. He closed his eyes and smiled before opening them and looking at her. You're thinking hard, aren't you? I wish I didn't have to. Naruto sat up. Okay. Then let's talk about something else. Scoot up, he commanded. Sakura complied. Naruto moved in behind her so that he was leaning against the tree and wrapped his arms around Sakura's waist and pulled her to him. He rested his chin on her shoulder as he asked, I want to know all about your childhood. Sakura turned her head just slightly so he could see her smile, before she began talking. Well, I'm sure you've connected the dots by now. Yes, I did used to live in the leaf. I had only been placed on my genin team for 2 days before I had to move. My parents never liked to bring it up. I took it pretty hard. It was the happiest moment of my life. I was finally a genin. I remember very little before that. I know there was this boy. He was the CL clown, but in a bad way. He was always getting in trouble. He was on my genin team. I remember being disappointed when our academy sensei called out his name. But I can't remember for the life of me what it was. When I moved to the mist, they made me go through their version of the academy all over again, so I was behind everybody. But holy shit. What? I just remembered something from my briefing for this mission. What is it? Naruto smiled. Guess who that annoying little boy was? Sakura took a few seconds to contemplate his question before her eyes widened. No way. She turned her torso around to look at him to confirm he wasn't lying. Well, I'll be damned. I don't know why I haven't remembered till now. I guess I just didn't have time to remember the details. He shrugged before smirking, disappointed. Who said that? Sakura pretended to look around for the culprit, before giggling. I was like 10 years old. And you have obviously turned into a kind, gentle and handsome man. As she said this, she caressed his cheek with her thumb. Naruto's face broke into a big grin. Okay, you're forgiven. He leaned in and quickly placed a kiss on her lips. Sakura's cheeks turned the color of a tomato. I don't remember giving you permission to kiss me. And what, exactly, are you going to do about it? Sakura placed her lips on Naruto's and left them there for several seconds. When Naruto tried to deepen the kiss, Sakura pulled away. He made pouty face. What did you do that for? Sakura grinned. Not now. We have a lot more to worry about. Naruto's face saddened. Like what? We can worry about everything tomorrow. Like building a fire. I don't know about you, but I'm freezing. Naruto's face was thoughtful. Now that you mention it. He stood up. I'll go collect some wood that wasn't soaked by your jutsu earlier. Sakura smiled as she watched him walk away. She reached up and touched her lips. I shouldn't have ended that kiss. What are you staring at? Sakura screamed and she practically jumped while turning around. Naruto, you. She took a deep breath. How did you do that? Oh, that's right. You don't know my favorite jutsu of all time. He smirked. We'll give you a hint. She heard Naruto say, but the Naruto in front of her hadn't moved his lips. She whipped around to find another Naruto walking towards her with more wood. Shadow clones, she stated. It took 10 minutes to get the fire going. As soon as it was, Naruto dispersed his clone. They both sat down next to each other. Without saying a word, Naruto grabbed her chin and made her look at him. Before she could utter a word, Naruto's lips were on hers. He pushed against her but she stabilized herself by putting an arm behind her. She wrapped the other arm around his neck. He tilted his head to deepen the kiss and she followed suit. She was new to kissing so she was going to make him initiate everything. A strange feeling was on her lips. His tongue, she figured. As soon as she parted her lips, his tongue darted in. Sakura decided to experiment and began to play with his tongue with her own. It was a different feeling, she had to admit. But she rather enjoyed it. The weight on her arm was beginning to become too much so she slowly began to lean back, bringing Naruto with her. He repositioned himself so that he was between her legs, without breaking the kiss. His hands had begun to explore her body, her stomach, thighs, wherever he could. There was a particular spot on her stomach right above her shorts that made her shiver every time he grazed it. Sakura's arms were tightly wrapped around Naruto's neck. She wanted him as close to her as possible. She's never experienced anything that made her feel like this. Her body was beginning to heat up. She tried to calm herself down, but her hormones were preventing it. She could hardly think straight. Sure, they were only kissing. But Sakura's first kiss had only occurred 30 minutes ago. For her, things were escalating fast and she didn't mind one bit. At some point during their kiss, Naruto had flipped them so Sakura was straddling him on top. The logical part of Sakura told her that this kiss needed to end and they needed to figure out what to do next. But the Sakura that had been hidden for so long was taking over in full force. She didn't want this kiss to end for quite a while. Sakura decided to be a slight tease. She kissed Naruto and pulled away slowly with his bottom lip between her teeth and waited for him to reach up and capture her lips again. She would do it several times before she would give in and kiss him deeply and lose herself in the kiss. At some point, Sakura found herself entangling her fingers in his hair, and as soon as she did, Naruto deepened the kiss and began to kiss her sloppily but pianely, from lack of control, she figured. She would never admit it out loud, but she loved when he went crazy like that. For the most part, Naruto's hands remained on her, holding her close to him. They would travel, however, up her back and down her thighs. Wherever his hands made contact, her skin felt as if it was on fire. They were enjoying a slow, soft kiss when Naruto finally pulled away. If I don't stop now, I never will. Sakura blushed heavily at his words but she nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. She was too full of emotions. She climbed off of him while he sat up. They were sitting side by side with her resting her head on his shoulder. Finally finding her voice she said, I'm not cold anymore. Naruto. His breath blew out in a rush through his lips as he glanced between himself and her. He was physically and emotionally tired. Never in his life has he felt the weight of his experiences rest over his shoulders as he watched every little move she made. His lip curved up in a small smile just watching her mess with her hair, thinking quietly to herself. The complete opposite of him, and yet that was what brought them together. This moment reminded him so much of that folk tale ninja used to tell each other whenever camping or taking a break on missions. Come think of it, the story reminded him of their situation. Once, many years ago, during the First Shinobi War, two ninjas of Konoha fought together against wave after wave of enemy. Their names, Naoko Tanaka and Suzu Yumino. They had planned to marry one another, but war had destroyed those plans. They were teammates who had just lost their third member to a surprise ambush attack. The second Hokage had given his life to allow his subordinates to retreat as their unit continued to fight in order to reach him, but they couldn't get through. They had just been given the order to retreat by their superior when they were surrounded by Cloud Ninja. Out of chakra, they stood back to back, their swords facing in a ready position to defend them. But in vain. They were surrounded and gravely outnumbered. Their hearts told them to flee together so their love may survive, and yet their brains told them to stay and defend their village to the death. Naoko had turned to Suzu and was about to tell her to make a run for it and he would cover her, but she stopped him and merely said, "If this is the end, I want to follow you to the beginning." He didn't argue his case any further as they were alted by countless shinobi. Blood stained the battlefield and bodies littered the ground as the two-leaf nin relied on each other as their strength depleted. Cuts and gashes covered them as they breathed heavily, looking for an end in the ranks of enemy, which would never come. Once a Cloud Nin died, another would replace him immediately. A sword pierced Naoko's stomach as he tried to block an attack intended for Suzu. As he fell to the ground, he slammed a kunai into his attacker's heart. Soon after, she fell next to him, her legs shredded to pieces. They died together on that night when he threw himself in front of a blade aimed for her in order to save her. Unknowing to him, the blade went through him and into her. He died right after as she slowly faded off into the darkness. When discovered, they were found smiling despite the dried blood caked across their lips. Legend had said the story came from a Cloud soldier who was there, while other stories say a Leaf shinobi watched it happen from a distance and couldn't make it in time to help them. Some conspiracies even say it was made up in order to help the war effort and there was no record of Naoko and Suzu ever existing. He tilted his head to look at Sakura. Her eyes flickered back up at him and let out a frustrated sigh. It seemed she was still nowhere with a reasonable plan. Either way, Naruto believed the legend was a true story. After all, he has seen that history does repeat itself. If Sakura and he were to stand by their villages, it would end in death like the legend. "You close to anything yet?" he asked, poking the wood in the fire, earning sparks to fly into the air. "It's not like baking a cake, Naruto. This takes time," she merely answered, her eyes still blank as she searched through her mind. He picked a twig from the ground and tossed it into the flames. "I find baking a cake to be extremely hard," he began. "You have to have all the ingredients, the sugar, flour, icing, and not to mention having to measure all the items. Hell, I don't even know what you do after that." His eyes met hers as she gave him a look that screamed, "Are you kidding me?" Naruto smiled, his grin spreading across his face. Sakura rolled her eyes, pushed away from him to stand onto her feet. He frowned watching her go as his arms fell to his legs. "Something wrong?" he asked. She rounded on him, clearly not happy. "Yes, something indefinitely wrong. How can you sit there cracking jokes? I don't know if you realized it yet, but we broke our loyalty. I have ran through all the possibilities in my head and believe me, most don't end good for us." She turned to face away from him and stared into the darkness of the trees. Her arms crossed over her chest as her fingers gripped into her forearms tightly. She was physically holding herself together to keep from slipping over that edge that defined them. He glanced to the sides of his body, deep in thought, before turning to stare at her figure against the night. Naruto pushed himself up despite the groaning of his body in protest. He staggered a few steps to her and wrapped his arms around her torso from behind, his head resting on her shoulder. She remained rigid for a few seconds like she was not used to the contact, but soon after her form relaxed against him. "You asked how I could just sit there cracking jokes, yay?" he told her, leaning in to face her. "It is because I know that no matter what, no matter the decision, no matter where our paths take us. I know that I will never stop trying to be with you. He smiled slightly before his face dipped into seriousness. Not even death will stand in my way. He pulled his head back to stare into the canopy of darkness. I know we will find a way. And I say we. You are not on your own, I will help you the entire way. He let the sounds of the forest interrupt while their minds lingered on his words and the battle they soon would be up against. He let go of her arms as she turned to face him. Besides, Naruto said, motioning up and down his body with his hands. The Mizukage can't touch this. Sakura's laugh caught her throat as she turned to the side, trying to muffle her laughs while pinching the bridge of her nose. You see, this is what I'm talking about. She told him, but no longer mad. She said the words as a joke and he took them as he was off the hook. He reached out and took her hand in his and led her back to the fire. Naruto eased himself down and she followed into his arms. They watched the dying fire as embers crackled, letting smoke rise into the air. The silence enveloped them, and in a way it was comforting. They didn't need to say anything. They could enjoy each other's silence without the need to speak. However, Naruto's mind was full of words. His cool and carefree appearance was actually a raging terminal on the inside as he tried to find a way for them to be together and yet not alert or betray their villages. Each suggestion in his mind ended with one of the party dying. That party, of course, never being Sakura, and he hated to think she was doing the exact same but in reverse. I'll take first watch, he told her after a while, watching the ambers dwindle down. She said, already starting to drift off to sleep. Her hand rose up to cup his cheek, bringing his head down to look at her. I've figured it out, she said after a while of gazing into his eyes. He waited for her to continue, his arm tightening around her waist. Whatever she may suggest, he knew he could pull it off. His curiosity piqued as so did his fear. As an Inu were always told to expect the unexpected, and yet her answer still caught him completely off guard. Her thumb brushed over his cheekbone, green eyes locking with blue. We both have to die.